The child's plea. The smoke still lingered in the air, heavy and bitter. The human soldier, Captain Daniel Ward, walked slowly through the ruins of the alien town. The war had ended only days ago, but the scars of fire and blood were fresh everywhere. Buildings lay broken, streets cracked, and silence pressed on every corner. Daniel's boots crunched over shattered glass and stone. He had been ordered to patrol, to ensure no threats remained. But what he found instead was emptiness, a town abandoned by hope. As he turned a corner, he heard it, a soft cry, faint yet desperate. It wasn't the cry of pain, but the cry of a child. He froze, listening carefully. The sound came again, muffled under fallen beams. Without thinking, Daniel rushed forward, pushing aside the debris. There, crouched in the shadows, was a small alien child, no older than 6 human years. Her skin shimmered faintly blue under the dust, and her wide luminous eyes looked up at him in fear and wonder. Before Daniel could speak, the child rushed forward, clutching his arm with trembling hands. Her voice broke with tears as she cried, "Please marry my mom. Human. She's kind." Daniel blinked, stunned by the words. Of all the things he expected in the ruins of war, this was not one of them. He knelt down slowly, his soldier's instincts warning him to be careful. The child's grip was tight, desperate, as if holding on to him was the only thing keeping her alive. Her tears streaked her small face, leaving trails on her dust-covered skin. Why would you say that?" Daniel asked softly, his voice low. The child hiccuped between sobs, her alien features trembling. "Because no one here will help us. They hate us now. Only a human can save us." Daniel's heart twisted. He had seen pain before, but the innocent plea of a child struck deeper than any wound. The girl's voice shook, but her eyes did not let go of his. "My father is gone, he died in the war. My mother is kind, but they say she betrayed them because she helped humans once. Now we are alone." She lowered her head, whispering, "They will hurt her. They will hurt me too." Daniel looked around, the streets eerily empty. Shadows moved behind broken windows, alien eyes watching him with quiet judgment. He felt the weight of their stares, cold and accusing. The child pressed her forehead against his hand, pleading, "If you marry her, they cannot hurt us. The law will protect us if we have a family. Please." His chest tightened. He had faced soldiers with weapons, enemies with claws, but never a child begging him for such a thing. He wanted to tell her no, that he could not, that it was impossible, but the words stuck in his throat. Her trembling voice echoed in his mind. She's kind, she's kind." Daniel gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "What is your name?" he asked. The girl sniffled. "Lyra." "Where is your mother, Lyra?" he said softly. Lyra pointed toward the broken remains of a house at the edge of the square. Her small hand shook as she whispered, "She's there, but she doesn't smile anymore." Daniel rose slowly, guiding her out from the rubble. As they walked, he felt the tension of unseen eyes still following. The alien town was not empty, but it was silent in its hostility. Every corner, every shadow, seemed to whisper against him. A human soldier, walking hand in hand with an alien child. When they reached the broken house, Daniel saw her. A woman stood at the doorway, tall and graceful even in rags. Her skin bore faint scars, her hair tangled, her eyes tired but deep with quiet strength. She froze when she saw him, her gaze shifting quickly to her daughter. "Lyra," she called out, rushing forward, pulling the child into her arms. Daniel stepped back, giving them space. The woman clutched Lyra tightly, whispering in their language, before finally turning to him. Her eyes softened, but her voice was firm. "Human soldier, why are you here?" Before Daniel could answer, Lyra shouted, "Mama, I told him to marry you so no one will hurt us." The mother's face burned with shame and sorrow. "Lyra, hush," she said quickly, her hand covering the child's mouth. She looked at Daniel, her voice breaking. "Forgive her. She does not understand. She is only afraid." But Daniel could see the truth in her eyes, the fear she tried to hide, the quiet plea she could not say aloud. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. The soldier, the mother, the child, all bound by war, loss, and something unspoken. From the shadows, voices whispered, carrying venom. Traitor's family, human's pet, shame. The words sliced through the air, unseen daggers thrown by those too afraid to step forward. Daniel's hand rested on the hilt of his weapon, not in threat, but in silent promise. He looked at the mother, then at the trembling child clinging to her. In that moment, he realized this was not just about survival. It was about a bond being born in the ashes of war. And though he had no answer yet, he knew one thing with certainty. This was only the beginning. The broken family. Night slowly settled over the broken alien town. The stars above looked cold, as if they too mourned the silence below. Captain Daniel Ward sat near the doorway of the ruined house, his back straight, his senses sharp. Inside, he could hear the faint murmur of the alien mother speaking to her child. Their voices were low, carrying both comfort and sorrow. The child, Lyra, peeked out at him now and then, her glowing eyes filled with trust. The mother, however, kept her distance, her gaze always guarded. Daniel understood. He was an outsider here, a human soldier in a place where humans were both feared and hated. Yet something kept him from walking away. Perhaps it was the desperate plea of the child, or the unspoken pain in the mother's eyes. When the door creaked open, the mother stepped outside, her posture straight despite her weariness. She studied him carefully before speaking, her voice soft but steady. "My daughter should not have spoken those words to you," she said, her accent heavy but her meaning clear. "She is young. She does not understand the weight of what she asks." Daniel nodded slowly. "I know she is afraid," he said, keeping his tone calm. The woman's eyes lowered to the ground, her hands clasped together tightly. "They call me a traitor," she whispered, "because I once gave water to a wounded human soldier. It was long ago, but they never forgave me." Her voice trembled for just a moment, but then it hardened. "Now, after the war, they hate me more than ever." Daniel listened in silence, his chest tightening with unease. He could imagine it, an entire community turning its back on her because of a single act of kindness. Lyra's small voice broke through the tension as she rushed forward, hugging her mother's side. "But you were kind, Mama. You saved lives. Why do they hate you for kindness?" The mother stroked her daughter's hair, her face shadowed with sorrow. "Because kindness can be seen as betrayal in times of war," she said softly. Her eyes shifted to Daniel, locking on him for the first time. "They see me as weak, because I did not wish for more blood." Daniel felt a heavy silence grow between them. He wanted to speak, to say that kindness was not weakness, but his words caught in his throat. Instead, he asked, "And your husband? What happened to him?" The woman's face changed at once, grief flooding her eyes. "He fought in the last battles," she said quietly, her voice like a blade scraping stone. "He never came home. I buried him with my own hands, before the bombs fell." Her grip tightened on her daughter's shoulder, as if afraid she might lose her too. Daniel looked away, the weight of her pain pressing against his chest. He had seen too many graves, too many broken families. Yet hearing it here, in the quiet night, it felt different, more personal, more raw. Lyra suddenly looked up at him with wide, pleading eyes. "That's why I asked you. Human, if you stay with us, no one can call Mama weak, no one can hurt us." Her little voice was steady, carrying more courage than her small body should hold. Daniel found himself speechless, the innocence of her words mixing with the harsh truth of survival. From the darkness beyond the broken street, voices rose, murmurs sharp with contempt. "Human lover, traitor's child, shameful." The words slithered like poison, drifting from the unseen watchers hiding in the night. The mother stiffened, pulling Lyra close. Daniel's hand instinctively touched the hilt of his weapon, ready but calm. He could feel the weight of their hatred pressing closer, even if they did not yet dare to act. The mother's voice cut through the tension, trembling but firm. "This is why she fears, this is why she dreams of impossible things." Her eyes flickered to his once more, her guard dropping just slightly. "You should leave, human soldier. The longer you stay, the more danger comes to us." Daniel looked at her, then at Lyra, who refused to let go of his sleeve. Every instinct told him to walk away, to obey her words, to avoid dragging them deeper into risk. But something stronger kept him rooted where he stood. He saw in their eyes the same thing he had lost long ago. Family, fragile, yet unbroken. And though he could not yet admit it, he knew he was already tied to their fate. The night grew colder, the whispers and the shadows sharper. But Daniel made no move to leave. He sat quietly, keeping watch, his presence alone a shield between them and the hate that prowled outside. The mother said nothing more, but her eyes lingered on him for a moment longer before she carried Lyra back inside. Daniel remained in the ruins, silent and steady. And for the first time since the war ended, he felt the weight of a new battle beginning. The mother appears. Dawn broke slowly over the ruined town. A pale light touched the broken walls, and the smoke of yesterday's fires still curled into the sky. Captain Daniel Ward had not slept. He sat near the doorway of the alien house through the night, watching the shadows. The voices of hate had faded into silence, but he knew eyes were still watching, always watching. Inside, he heard the quiet stir of movement. The door opened, and the alien mother stepped out. The light of morning brushed her face, and Daniel saw her clearly for the first time. Her skin carried faint marks of old wounds. Her eyes were deep pools of sadness, yet there was a quiet strength in the way she moved. Even in rags, she stood with dignity, as if the weight of the world could not bend her completely. She glanced at him, cautious, as if testing whether his presence was real or only another shadow of the war. "You stayed," she said, her voice low. Daniel nodded, his gaze steady. "I said I would watch over you for the night." The woman's eyes flickered, unreadable, as if his words had stirred something unspoken. Before either could say more, a small figure rushed between them. Lyra, her daughter, her little hands clutching Daniel's sleeve with joy. "You see, Mama? He did not leave us. He is strong. He is human. He can protect us." The girl's innocent words made the mother's face flush with shame and sorrow. She knelt down, pulling Lyra close. "Do not say such things," she whispered sharply. But the child shook her head stubbornly, her glowing eyes shining with hope. "He will keep us safe. I know it. He will not let them hurt us again." Her words hung in the air, pure yet heavy. Daniel looked at the mother, her face tight with conflict. She whispered, "Forgive her. She carries hope where she should not." Her voice cracked, and for the first time Daniel heard the raw pain beneath her calm. "My name is Saran," she said finally, standing tall again. "Know it, so you will understand that I am not only alien mother to you." Daniel inclined his head. "Saran," he repeated, letting the name rest on his tongue. It felt strange, almost sacred, a name spoken in the ruins of distrust. Saran's eyes lingered on him for a moment longer, then shifted away. Her face was calm, but her hands trembled slightly, as though she held back words too dangerous to release. The quiet was broken by the sound of stones shifting. From the far side of the street, a group of alien figures emerged, their faces twisted with scorn. They stopped when they saw Daniel, their whispers sharp and filled with venom. "There she is, traitor with her pet human. Shame, she hides behind him now." Saran stiffened, her arms wrapping protectively around Lyra. Daniel rose slowly, his hand resting on his weapon but not drawing it. The group sneered, spitting words into the air but too afraid to come closer. Finally, with hateful glares, they melted back into the ruins, their threats left hanging in the morning light. Saran exhaled shakily, her eyes burning with anger and despair. "This is our life now," she said bitterly. "Every day, whispers, threats, hatred." Her voice trembled, but she did not cry. Daniel studied her, his jaw tightening. "You should not have to live like this," he said. Saran's laughter was soft and hollow, without joy. "What choice do I have? A widow, marked as a traitor, raising a child alone. There is no place for us." Her eyes grew darker, and for a heartbeat her mask broke. "You think my daughter's words were only foolish dreams? No, she spoke the truth of our law. Only families are protected. Only wives and children of the strong may be safe." Daniel felt the weight of her words, the truth cutting through his chest. So that was why the child had begged him. Not out of innocence alone, but because even at her young age she understood the cruel rules of her people. Saran shook her head, anger in her voice. "But I will not ask you. I cannot ask you. I will not bind a human to our shame." Her words were sharp, yet her eyes betrayed a storm of fear and longing. Lyra clung tighter to her mother, her small voice breaking the silence. "But Mama, if he goes, they will hurt us more. Please, don't send him away." The plea tore at Saran's heart, and Daniel saw it clearly in her trembling hands. A mother torn between pride and survival, between protecting her daughter and shielding her own dignity. Daniel stood quietly, his thoughts heavy. He had come as a soldier, not as a savior, but now the path before him was no longer simple. The eyes of the community were against them, the law was against them, even survival itself seemed against them. Yet the bond between child, mother, and soldier was growing, born not from choice, but from desperation and unspoken trust. As the morning light grew stronger, Daniel met Saran's gaze once more. For the first time, neither looked away. And though no promises were spoken, something fragile and dangerous had already begun. Shadows of war. The days passed slowly in the ruined town. Captain Daniel Ward stayed near the broken home, never fully welcomed, never fully gone. To the community, he was a reminder of war, a symbol of bloodshed. But to Lyra, he was hope, and to Saran, he was an unspoken shield. Everywhere they went, whispers followed. On the streets, in the markets, behind cracked windows, voices hissed like venom. Traitor's widow, human's dog, weakling hiding behind him. The words clung to the air, sharp as knives. Saran walked with her head high, but Daniel could see the pain in her tightened jaw. One evening, Saran carried a small basket of food from the market. Her steps quickened as shadows began to gather behind her. Daniel saw it from across the street, his instincts sharp. A group of alien men followed, their eyes burning with hate. They cornered her near the alley, their voices dripping with cruelty. "Does your human feed you now?" one sneered. Another spat at her feet. "How low you have fallen, Saran, begging scraps from your enemy." Saran's hand tightened on the basket, her daughter hiding behind her. Her voice was calm but trembling. "Leave us be." The men laughed, their anger growing bolder. "You should be cast out, both of you," one growled, stepping closer. "Or maybe worse." Another hissed, his eyes darting toward Lyra. Saran's body shifted protectively in front of her child, her heart pounding. Before the men could move further, Daniel appeared. His presence filled the narrow alley like iron, his shadow stretching long in the fading light. He did not draw his weapon, but his hand rested calmly on the hilt. "Walk away," he said, his voice cold but steady. The men froze, glaring at him, spitting their hatred through their eyes. But none dared to step forward. Finally, with curses under their breath, they backed into the shadows, their threat unbroken but delayed. Saran exhaled shakily, her hands trembling as she clutched Lyra close. Daniel stepped forward, his voice quieter now. "They will come again," he said, not as a warning but as truth. Saran's eyes met his, anger and despair clashing within her. "Do you see? This is our life. Hunted, cornered, despised," she whispered, her voice breaking. "And now, because you stay near us, they grow more violent." Daniel looked down, guilt pressing against his chest. He wanted to tell her he could leave, but the words would not form. He wanted to say she would be safer without him, but even he did not believe it. Because he had seen the fire in those men's eyes, whether he stayed or not, they would come again. Lyra tugged on her mother's sleeve, her voice small but steady. "But Mama, he protected us, didn't you see? He didn't let them hurt us." Saran closed her eyes, torn between truth and fear. Her daughter's trust was like light in the darkness, yet it also chained her heart. How long could a child's hope stand against an entire world's hatred? That night, Daniel sat near the house again, silent, watchful. Saran moved about quietly inside, tending to her daughter, her movements graceful even in sorrow. Now and then her eyes lingered on him through the cracked doorway. There was no thanks spoken, no words of welcome, but her silence carried something deeper. It was not acceptance, but it was not rejection either. The stars above shimmered faintly, and the town lay heavy in darkness. Daniel thought of his own people, of the comrades he had lost, of the home he no longer had. The faces of war haunted him, yet here, in this fragile house, he felt a different weight. Not the duty of a soldier, but the fragile bond of a man tied to a child's hope and a mother's silent plea. Far away, in the corners of the town, another fire stirred. The men who had cornered Saran gathered with others, their anger growing. They spoke in hushed voices, plotting in the dark. "The human protects her," one spat. "Then we will strike harder." They both must be erased, her shame, his presence, another snarled. Plans of violence twisted in the night, unseen, unheard, yet moving closer with every breath. Inside the house, Saran tucked Lyra into bed. Her daughter clung to her, whispering, "Mama, he will stay, he will protect us, I know it." Saran kissed her forehead, her eyes heavy with unshed tears. She whispered back, "Sleep, little one." Though in her heart she feared the storm was only beginning. Daniel stood guard under the cold starlight. He did not know their language fully. He did not know their laws, but he knew one truth. The shadows of war had not ended. They had only changed shape. And soon, he would face them again, not as a soldier of an army, but as one man standing for a family that was not his. The proposal of survival. The following morning, the sun rose weak and pale, its light struggling to pierce the haze that hung over the ruined town. Captain Daniel Ward stood outside the broken home, his eyes scanning the empty streets. The whispers of last night still lingered in his mind, voices filled with hate, promises of violence. He knew it was only a matter of time before the shadows struck again. Inside, Saran moved quietly, preparing a simple meal from what little food remained. Her hands were steady, but Daniel noticed how often her eyes flicked toward the window. She too felt the weight of the unseen watchers, the town's silent judgment pressing against her walls. Lyra sat near her mother, humming softly, pretending to be brave, though fear lingered in her wide eyes. Daniel stepped in, breaking the silence. "They are planning something," he said, his tone calm but heavy. Saran froze, the knife in her hand trembling before she set it down. "I know," she whispered, her voice hollow. "They will not stop until they destroy us." For a moment, only the crackle of the small fire filled the room. Then Saran turned to him, her eyes sharp with desperation hidden beneath dignity. "Do you understand now why my daughter begged you?" she asked, her voice trembling. Daniel's brow furrowed, but he remained silent, listening. Saran drew a shaky breath, her words falling like stones into the air. "Our law is cruel, but it is absolute," she said. "A woman without a husband is seen as weak, unprotected, open for exile or worse." Her hands tightened, her voice breaking. With a husband, no matter who he is, she and her child cannot be cast out, they cannot be touched. Daniel felt the truth cut into him like a blade. So that was why Lyra's words carried such weight. The plea of a child was not only innocent, it was survival. Saran's eyes glistened as she looked at him, her lips trembling but firm. "I ask you not out of love, not out of choice, but out of need," she whispered. "Pretend, if nothing else, be the shield they cannot break." The silence stretched heavy between them. Daniel's chest tightened, torn between reason and something deeper. He was a soldier, not a savior, his life built on orders and battles, not on family or vows. Yet here was a mother, proud and scarred, lowering herself to plead for the life of her child. Lyra broke the silence, her small voice carrying through the room. "Please, human," she whispered, clutching his sleeve. "If you go, they will take us. If you stay, they will not dare." Her glowing eyes shone with pure trust, the kind of trust he had not seen in years. Daniel looked down at her tiny hands gripping him, fragile yet unyielding. He could not turn away, not from her. Saran turned her face aside, ashamed of the words she had spoken. "I know this is madness," she said bitterly, "but I would rather beg a human than see my daughter dragged into the streets." Her voice cracked, her strength finally breaking for a heartbeat. Daniel stepped closer, his voice low, steady. "Saran, I do not know your customs, I do not know your laws, but I know this. No child should beg for her mother's safety." Her eyes flicked up to him, searching his face. For a moment, the wall between them cracked, and she let him see the fear, the hope, the quiet longing she buried. Daniel's jaw tightened, his decision forming in silence. "If I stand with you," he said, his tone heavy, "then we do this together, not as a game, not as a trick, but as survival." Saran's lips parted, shock flashing across her face. She had not expected him to agree, not truly. Lyra gasped with joy, throwing her arms around Daniel's waist, her laughter ringing like fragile bells in the broken house. "You see, Mama? He will protect us. I told you he would," she cried. Saran turned away, her hand covering her mouth, her body trembling. For the first time in many years, tears slipped down her face, tears she had sworn never to show. The moment hung heavy, fragile yet powerful. Daniel felt the weight of what he had agreed to. This was no soldier's duty, no command given by his army. This was a choice, dangerous and irreversible. Outside, the town still watched. The enemies who hated them still whispered in the dark. But within the broken home, something new had begun. Not love yet, not peace yet, but the first spark of both, hidden beneath fear and survival. Daniel looked at Saran one last time, his voice quiet. Then it is decided, he said. She turned to face him, her tears drying, her strength returning piece by piece. Her eyes met his, not with gratitude, but with a silent vow. Together, they had stepped into a dangerous path, and there would be no turning back. Love amidst fire. The days that followed were heavy with tension. Daniel's presence by Saran's side was no longer silent protection, it became open defiance. Word spread quickly across the broken town. Whispers turned into stares, and stares into quiet curses. Yet no one dared strike openly, because now Saran was no longer alone. A human soldier stood beside her, and even hatred trembled before strength. Inside the small home, a strange rhythm began to form. Saran would cook what little food she had. Daniel would repair broken walls with his steady hands. Lyra would sit between them, humming songs, her laughter softening the weight of the air. At first, Saran kept her distance, her eyes sharp, her tone clipped. But Daniel noticed how her hands lingered a little longer when she passed him water, how her voice softened when she spoke his name. It was not love yet, but the ground beneath them had begun to shift. One evening, Lyra pulled Daniel toward the hearth. "Tell us about humans," she begged, her glowing eyes wide with wonder. Daniel hesitated, then sat down, his voice low. He told her of green fields on earth, of rivers shining under the sun, of children running free without fear. Lyra listened with awe, her small hands clasped under her chin. Saran, though pretending not to care, leaned closer, her face caught by the flicker of firelight. For a moment, the house was no longer broken. It was alive with warmth. But the shadows outside grew darker. The men who despised Saran gathered again, their plans sharpening. "They think hiding behind a human will save them," one spat. "We will burn them out, and let the flames finish what the war did not," another growled. The fire of hatred spread silently, waiting for the night to strike. That night, Daniel felt the danger before it arrived. The stillness of the town was too deep, too heavy. Then it came, stones thrown against the walls, the crackle of fire catching dry wood. Lyra screamed as smoke seeped into the house. Saran pulled her close, terror flashing in her eyes. Daniel rushed to the door, kicking it open, the flames dancing outside. Figures moved in the shadows, torches in their hands, their voices cruel. "Let the human burn with her," they shouted. "Let them all be ash." Daniel drew his weapon, his eyes blazing. "Enough," he growled, stepping into the smoke. The mob faltered, their courage shaken by the fire in his stance. But anger drove them forward, stones and flames raised high. Saran's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and desperate. "Please stop. There is a child inside," she cried. But her words fell on deaf ears, the hatred too deep. Daniel stood his ground, his blade flashing in the firelight. He struck down the torches, scattering embers, forcing the men back step by step. The clash was brief but brutal, their rage breaking against his strength. When the mob finally fled into the night, curses trailing behind them, silence fell heavy once more. Daniel returned inside, smoke clinging to his skin, his chest heaving. Saran was kneeling on the floor, Lyra in her arms, tears streaking both their faces. When she looked up at him, her eyes were no longer filled with guarded distance. They were filled with something else, fear, relief, and a fragile spark of trust. She whispered, "You saved us again." Daniel shook his head, his voice rough. "I only did what had to be done." Saran rose slowly, stepping closer, her face inches from his. Her hands trembled as she touched his arm, the scars of her people meeting the scars of a soldier. "You could have walked away," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But you stayed. You fought, not as a soldier, but for us." Daniel met her gaze, the firelight dancing in her eyes. In that fragile moment, the wall between them cracked fully. Not survival, not duty, but something deeper took root. Lyra, watching from her mother's embrace, smiled through her tears. "I told you, Mama. He will protect us," she whispered. Saran pulled her daughter close, her eyes never leaving Daniel's. The bond between them was no longer a lie, no longer only a shield. It was the beginning of something real, forged in fire. Outside, the ruins still smoldered, the threat was not gone. The hatred of the town had only grown. But inside the broken house, a new flame had begun to burn. Not the fire of war, but the fire of trust, of fragile love. A fire that could not be extinguished so easily. A new dawn. The night after the attack was long and restless. The broken home smelled of smoke, its walls blackened, yet still standing. Saran sat near the hearth with Lyra asleep in her arms, her eyes heavy but awake. Daniel stood by the doorway, his blade resting across his knees, watching the darkness outside. The silence between them was not empty anymore. It was filled with unspoken truths. When morning came, the town stirred with whispers again. But this time the whispers carried more than hatred. They carried fear. The mob had failed to break Saran, failed to burn her, failed to scare the human away. The story of Daniel standing against the fire spread quickly, and though many still spat insults, some began to wonder, why would a human fight for them, unless his heart had chosen their side? Saran stepped outside with Daniel that morning, her chin high. The neighbors glared, some hissed, but none dared to come closer. Daniel walked beside her, calm, steady, his presence unshaken. Lyra skipped at their side, her little hand holding both of theirs. Her laughter broke through the bitterness of the street, defying the shadows that clung to them. But the danger had not ended. That evening, a group of the same men who had attacked gathered once more, their rage boiling. "This cannot continue," their leader growled. "If we let them live, she will shame us forever." They armed themselves with blades and stones, ready to finish what the fire had failed. The storm was coming. Inside the house, Saran sensed it, her body tense as she looked at Daniel. "They will come again," she whispered, her voice breaking. Daniel nodded, his eyes steady. "Then we meet them here." Lyra clung to her mother, her small voice trembling. "Don't be afraid, Mama. He will protect us." Her words gave Saran strength, even as fear gnawed at her heart. The attack came under the pale light of dawn. The door shook with blows, voices roared outside. "Come out, traitor! Come out and face judgment," they cried. Daniel stepped forward, opening the door wide, his figure tall in the dim light. The crowd froze for a moment, their rage colliding with the calm fire in his eyes. "You will not touch them," Daniel said, his voice carrying like iron. The mob surged, anger blinding them, blades raised, stones hurled. Daniel met them head-on, his blade flashing, his strength unbroken. Each strike pushed them back. Each step he took defied their hate. The fight was fierce, the sound of steel clashing against stone echoing through the street. Saran stood at the doorway, holding Lyra close, her voice crying out, "Leave us. We have done nothing to you." But her words only fueled the mob. They pushed harder, determined to end her, to end the human, to end the shame they carried in their hearts. Then something shifted. Neighbors who had watched silently for days stepped forward. An old alien man raised his staff, blocking one of the attackers. Others shouted at the mob, "Enough! This has gone too far." The weight of the town began to turn, their hatred cracking under the truth before their eyes. The mob faltered, their courage breaking as they saw Daniel still standing, unyielding. Blood stained his arm, but his stance never wavered. His eyes blazed not with vengeance, but with unshakable resolve. He was no longer just a soldier, no longer just a human. He had become something more: protector, shield, family. At last, the mob scattered, their rage broken, their threats empty. Silence fell heavy on the street, only the sound of Daniel's breath filling the air. Saran stepped forward, her hands trembling as she touched his arm. "You could have left us, but you stayed," she whispered, her eyes shining with tears. Daniel looked at her, then at Lyra, who smiled through her tears. "I stayed," he said simply. The dawn broke fully then, the light spilling across the ruins. Saran reached for Daniel's hand, her grip strong despite her trembling. For the first time, she held it not in fear, not in shame, but in choice. Lyra clapped her small hands, her voice bright with joy. "See, Mama, I told you he would protect us." The town still bore scars. The whispers would never vanish completely. But in that moment, something stronger had been born. Not just survival, not just protection, but a bond forged in fire and blood. A bond that could not be broken by war, by hate, or by fear. As the sun rose higher, painting the sky gold, Saran and Daniel stood side by side. No vows spoken, no promises declared, yet the truth was clear. They were no longer alone. A new dawn had come, and with it, the fragile hope of a future.